At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Kyle Gillette, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Dr. Doug.
Hey, it's great to have you on this show. I'm really excited to talk about some of the things that you've been, obviously promoting, and particularly in your book and so forth. So what I'd love for you to do is to kind of tell the audience who you are and how on earth did you get to this point in your life where you've developed this whole system of blue leadership as well as other things.
Yeah, sure. So what's interesting is you're in Thailand, and my dad sells oranges to people in Thailand for sure. They
Oh,
export
wow.
from California all the way out to Thailand. And so I grew up on an orange farm in the Central Valley of California, did that life until I was 18, went off to college and decided that ag business was not for me, and ended up choosing a different major altogether and went to the exercise science route. Ended up wrapping that thing up, and I had gone on a missions trip to India with it was a church of, I don't know how many people, but there's 20 people on the trip, and great experience there. We did our thing and we came back, and I was wrapping up my senior year of college, and I was, in short, afraid to become an adult because college was a lot of fun, had a lot of fun with friends. I did a ton of sports, spent a lot of time on the beach playing volleyball, surfing. I did okay in school, but it was just fantastic experience, and I wasn't ready to go, let's go professional and do the whole professional life. And I remember talking to my parents on the phone and said, Mom, Dad, I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. I'm a little bit lost. And like, you'll figure it out. Maybe you should pursue personal training or whatever. They weren't too worried about it, but I was terrified. So I would say 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from John, one of the guys on the trip. And he said, hey, Kyle, there's this opportunity at this men's mentoring program I think you'd be a perfect fit for. And I'm sitting at my desk in the apartment I was in and thinking to myself, yeah, I need to be mentored. I need to live in the program and have the opportunity to be mentored. But he was talking about me leading these guys. So I'm going, okay, let me learn some more about it. So I go to the job, to the interview, and I remember pulling onto the property, and you drive down this long driveway onto this 20 acre ranch. It was an old dairy farm, not active anymore. And you pull onto the property over this creek on this bridge, and then there's these chain link fence with a bunch of dogs barking at you. But they're happy dogs because it's a doggy daycare. Right? You pull up a little further, and there's this old farmhouse built in 1886, wraparound porch, American flag, green grass, just beautiful setting. And I'm like, what am I getting myself into? I pull up, walk up the sidewalk to the front door, knock on it, and Jack, the president, opens it. Long story short, I interview for an hour and a half. I feel like the couch and someone is pushing me down into the couch and saying, you belong here, you stay here. So they asked me, do I want to do this? And I said, yes. I didn't know what I was getting into. Well, 10 years later, I finally leave the program, and I'm married, and I have a couple kids, and I'm moving up to the Pacific Northwest. But in that window, I was mentored for 10 years. I mentored others for 10 years, and I learned business, and I learned pet resorts, and I learned nonprofits, and I learned all that world, and then came up here and dabbled a little bit more in the nonprofit world and a little bit in the corporate world, and then opened my own business. So that's a little bit of a short version, but that's a lot of the history to get to where I am.
Well, and I know you have a huge focus on business and helping business leaders and so forth. And I have always learned. In fact, I remember when I was doing some business consulting, I would tell my clients, what we're going to learn here applies to your personal life. There's such a correlation here. And so, today I'd love to chat a lot more about some of the things that you're doing, things that you use, the techniques that you use, and how they can be applied to an individual who's listening today in their life. And I know there's a lot of things that you talk about. I had a chance to go through your book and read a little bit of it, and I found that fascinating.
Yeah.
So first of all, your book, what's the name of your book?
Right Now Leadership, a 4-part framework for today's leader.
Okay, great. And quite frankly, as I say, as I was reading it, it's like, wow, this is so applicable to personal life
Oh yeah.
and as well as leaders. So one of the things you talk about is the four components of change and why is it important to change? So what are your thoughts about that and why talk about what changes and how do we do that?
Yeah. So do you want me to talk about the four pillars in my book or the four components of change?
Well, we can talk about all of that. I know also you talk about NLP. You're an NLP
Yeah,
coach. Let's start there because
sure.
that kind of opens up the foundation of what we're really talking about. Because NLP, neuro linguistic programming, is something to help people to do what?
Yeah, you take NLP is the taking on of the habits of people that have got it figured out. It's kind of the short version of what NLP is. And they got it figured out through the language that they use, the language that they say to others or they say to themselves. And that language then programs the way that you see the world and it adjusts the way you see the world, which then means you change your habits, you change your mindsets, and then you change your results. So NLP is taking the most effective use of language in the lives of other people that were studied, primarily psychologists that were studied by Bandler and Grindler are the two primary people of NLP, using those effective methods and then teaching people how to use it in their everyday lives and businesses.
Well, and there's a process too as a coach. If you're an NLP coach and you are working with someone, what are you trying to do for them? And why would someone come to you and say, all right, you know what, I need some help. Here's my situation. And you're going, okay, NLP is going to work for you and I'm going to take you through some processes.
Yeah, let me give you two stories. So the first story is something that happened today. And actually, well, there's kind of three, but the story that happened today is in NLP, there's some kind of interesting things you can do because you can reprogram the brain with the language that you use and the visuals that you use and your approach to things. And one of my clients has an allergy to eggs. And she really loves eggs, but she got some sort of a vaccine, a flu vaccine many years ago. And since that time, she then couldn't eat eggs anymore. It gave her terrible stomach ache and worse as well. And so I'm telling her about this is something I can do because I helped my daughter get rid of her allergies. I helped a client get rid of his allergy to palm oil. And there's other things that I've helped my clients with in regards to those things. So I told her, she's like, let's try it. And so one of the crazy things about NLP is you're taking a disassociated look at yourself. So you're looking at your problem, your situation, and you're separating yourself from it. So an analogy of this would be journaling. When you journal, you're looking at your situation and you're separating yourself from it and writing about it. Well, I'm doing that in real time with someone as I guide them through the process. So I guided her through the process and she's going to test those eggs tonight to see what happens. And she's going to be free of it is what's going to be the coolest part of it because her brain has let go of that thought that she is allergic to eggs. Now,
So
that
do you find that that is an experience that she had in childhood? Is it, and we get real deep here, but is it potentially a DNA memory from past ancestors? What is it? And as you say, you've helped some other people with allergies. When you get back to that area of looking at what is the primary reason that that even occurred, what do you usually find?
yeah, so if we go into kind of a deeper layer of this when it comes to the work I
Mm-hmm.
do with my clients, one of another story is a gentleman by the name of first name Andrew, and he came to me and he had one of those fidget spinners and he's just spinning it the whole time that we're talking. Right, we're doing his stuff and he's just spinning this fidget spinner and he's got ADD, self-admitted. I don't know if it's self-diagnosed or actually diagnosed, but he is just all over the place. And the thing about the NLP is you do get to the root. And so there's a very specific process that I go through with my clients where I'm asking them, if you knew where this issue arose, whatever the issue is, whatever the emotion is, or whatever the limiting belief is, if you knew when it was, and do you have a picture of that? Do you have an understanding where the root cause was? They get an idea of where that root cause is, and then because you can't have emotions in the future, I help them to get before that experience and behind it. Because any emotions that I have are only for now. If I'm thinking about something in the future, I'm anxious about it, that emotion is still happening now. And if I'm angry about something that happened in the past, that thing happened in the past, but my emotion can only be now. And
Right.
so if I get my client to see their experience, that root cause of that experience, maybe it was a trauma, somebody said something or did something that was difficult for them, and it really kind of tweaked them and created this anger or the sadness or some sort of a limiting belief. If you can see that disassociated, watching yourself experience that like a movie, then your brain sees it in front of you in your future. And since you can't have emotions in the future, your brain lets go of it. It lets go of the emotions and it keeps the learning experience from it. And so I
Well,
do this. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, and I was going to say, and oftentimes you reframe that experience, or do you do that where you help them to reframe it from a third party aspect and realize that, you know what I've been believing here is not really reality. What is reality is that this is what really happened. And it was not me. It was, for instance, I had a client that I did this with, and we went back and we found out that it was his teacher as he was in early grade school that was in some respects emotionally abusing him. And when that changed, it made all the difference. So do you find that that's the case?
Yep, that's what happens. And most of the time they figure that out without too much guidance with me from me. I usually help them to
Hmm.
kind of get before the experience. And then often you'll get that smile, or you'll get a laugh, or you'll get the shoulder relax, or whatever. There's some sort of a physical change in the person that you can see, and you know that they've learned the lesson, that they've let go of the emotions or limiting belief tied to it. They've learned the lesson, and then from there we're able to press forward with that specific emotion or limiting belief through all the other experiences that also have that emotion or limiting belief tied to it. And by the time you get to today, they've let go of all the past stuff, but they've learned everything from it. So I had this thought that I wasn't worthy of the mission that I've been given in life. That was my hang up. That was a huge hang up for me when I was going through this process. And when I finally got this release where generations ago, I saw two men fighting over a horse. Don't know what the heck that is. I wasn't alive, but that's what my mind brought to me. And whether it was symbolic or real didn't matter to me. But for me, it was this realization it was about anger. And I was able to actually, I think it might have been about guilt, but regardless, I was able to let go of that guilt, and it freed me to let go of the present tense, the present time guilt. And so lots of my clients have gone through that type of experience where they see some sort of a past event in their life or some metaphorical past event, and letting go of that experience and all the emotions tied to it frees them from it today. And then change can occur at that point. Real change that sticks then occurs at that point.
So what happened with Andrew?
Yeah, so Andrew had to deal with some family stuff with that. So he dealt with the family stuff in his past and let go of the emotions tied to it. And then he pressed forward into dealing with how that was impacting him all the way up to today. Let go of those emotions, limiting beliefs, learned the lessons, and then we put it into his future, which just means basically if you're going to experience something that would normally make you mad or normally make you sad or anxious, how do you now predict you're going to experience that? And he was able to realize that there was really kind of some silliness into the way that he thought he was going to perceive it. Okay, great. That's just imagination. So let's fast forward 2 months later, and we're having a conversation on a hike at 5 in the morning. And he's telling me that, dude, my anxiety's gone. I'm calm. I'm at peace. When I have conversations with people, I have to interrupt them all the time. I can just wait. I can just wait for what they have to say. He's a real estate agent that likes to talk and like kind of has to prove himself a lot. And so he's telling me this on the hike, and he's just at this way different state of mind because he the lessons he learned allowed him to just relax, and he doesn't have to prove himself near as much anymore. And that changed his fidgeting, that changed his anxiety, which allowed him to really let go of a lot of things. And now he and his girlfriend are working more effectively together in their business. And he's kind of in the back burner now instead of having to be in the front and always getting attention. So it's really cool. He just told me, and I'm like, yeah, kind of to be expected, but it's really neat when you get to hear it and see it in someone.
Well, and you know, the reason I wanted to talk about this is that I find that, you know, as you know, as you've been on a bunch of podcasts, you know, there are a lot of things you can talk about self-help and, you know, really trying to work through a lot of these type of things. But I personally have found that NLP, if you can find a good practitioner that can really help you, it is it is a miraculous thing that can be done to really help you. So as the audience is listening, and if they're experiencing some of these, you know, challenges, you know, if they could find someone such as yourself, and we'll talk about how they could reach you, you know, an NLP practitioner that really knows what they're doing, it's a way, it's a practical way to help them to start to do that internalization and release some of those things that are going on.
Yeah, I agree. I was working with this guy today and I was helping him with migraines. And so we were working through some conversation about it, and I helped him create a picture of what his migraine looks like. And so he created a picture of the color, the sound, the feel, whatever. And then I said, okay, go ahead and hand it to me. I said, give it to me so I can get rid of it. I can throw it out. Right. I was just kind of experimenting with him to see what was going to be most effective to help him let go of this
Right.
thing. And he said, I'm getting a little emotional right now. And I noted that in my brain, and we continued the process, and we finished up, and that remains to be seen, right? We have to see how that plays out for him. But it made me realize that we hold on to stuff so tightly that's so bad for us. And when you create a picture of what it is in your mind's eye, of what it looks like to have a migraine, or what it looks like to be angry at someone, or what it looks like to be have a bad habit, or whatever mindset's going on that you don't want anymore, when you create that image and then someone asks you, can you hand that to me? Can you let that go? Is essentially what I was telling him. And he really couldn't in that right in that moment. He really couldn't. It was so tied to who he is and his identity that it was difficult for him to let it go. And I think that it's because it's all intertwined in our wiring, for lack of a better term, in our neurology. And until we kind of give ourselves permission to let it go, it's very difficult to let go of these bad mindsets and these bad habits. And then if you don't let them go, which is you asked me about change, that's the release part. And until you release it, that first step of change, we're going to be kind of bouncing back and forth. We're going to be yo-yoing like you do, like some people do when they diet. They lose the weight and they go back to the old habits. They gain it back. They lose the weight, back and forth. So we have to let go, and then you can begin to get free and change your habits. And so again, step one is the release component of change.
Well, and you know that brings me to chapter 3 of your book, which I really loved. Which, as people start to recognize and actually go through a process like that, I think what happens is that they suddenly become aware that, all right, this is really what's happening subconsciously in my life, and it's causing my perception of life and my behavior and all of those types of things. And then does that move them into what we would talk about as far as self-awareness? Does it help them to get to the point where they're now becoming self-aware?
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness to me is simply hearing your inner voice, hearing yourself and the way you talk to yourself. That's the very first part of it. And then you start to recognize the habits. Then you start to recognize your attitudes. There's a lot of things that come with that. I have 5 mindsets and 5 habits that are tied to it all. But that's the first component. And then once you're aware of all those things and how you perceive yourself, how you perceive others, you're aware of your emotions, your emotional intelligence rises. But now you're at a new level of awareness. You're at a new level of who you can be. So then you got to tap into accountability. You got to tap into that next level of locking it in, essentially locking in that self-awareness at that new level, because you never end the increase in self-awareness, but you got to lock in at least that new level, which is where before I wrote that book, or I should say it this way, after I wrote that book, I actually got into the NLP stuff. And so now I know how to make that self-awareness happen a lot quicker and lock in the accountability a lot quicker so that people can keep the change instead of having to fight so hard to stay self-aware and keep that new level of change. And that's been a really cool shift in my understanding of how those four pillars can be much more quickly worked through and cycled through because of an LP.
Well, and that's great. And so let's talk about those. You said you had, what is it? One, two, three, four, five mindset. You've got the values, the humble, the patience, the trusting, the observant. Can you share with the audience what they are and explain a little bit about them?
Sure. Yeah. So values mindset is your filter for decision making. So you pick your values, you choose your values based on kind of a deeper inner look at who you are and what's most important to you. And then those 5 to 7 words, sometimes a few more, but 5 to 7 words really determine the filter that you use for decision making. And then humility is accepting feedback, in short, is being able to see that you don't have it all figured out, and that, you know what, I need that feedback. I need to know where I stand within myself and how other people see me is kind of the simplest way to look at humility. Patience is pretty self-explanatory, right? Being patient is very explanatory, but the way that I see it is it's not necessarily patience with others, it's patience with yourself, because most people are really over controlling of themselves, of situations. And I think this ties into anxiety and worry also.
Yes.
We get so impatient with situations, we get so impatient with what's upcoming, that you get the anxiety building and you get the worry building. And so if you can just be patient with yourself and circumstances, which I'm not, that is my worst one for sure, then, but when you can get there, then it's a lot easier to be aware of what's going on. Because back to you can't have emotions in the future. If I'm constantly thinking about the future or frustrated about my past, I'm not present. And so I lose my patience because
Yeah.
I'm focusing on the wrong thing. Right. So I lose my patience. And then the trusting mindset is it's trusting your intuition, trusting yourself, trusting your emotions, trusting the insights that you're getting. But primarily it's about that intuition and going, what is my gut telling me? What is my unconscious telling me? And running with that. And then finally, observant mindset is it's about observing yourself and how well do you know your own body language? How well do you know your own tone of voice? Do you recognize how quickly you're speaking? Do you recognize your nervousness, eye contact? There's just a lot of things that are happening when you observe yourself. And then, of course, you can do the same as you observe other people. And I always recommend people check out DISC for a tool to help you be more observant of yourself and other people, just as a simple tool to give you a framework to use.
Well,
So,
and yeah, and the disc, you're talking about the disc evaluation, behavioral evaluation, right?
yes.
Yeah. And, and that, to me, that is so amazing. It's such a good foundation, as you say, to be able to start to understand yourself and your values. And if you do the real deep one, where you really get into your values and what's motivating you and all those type of things, and really starting to understand that you can find yourself in those three different levels. You can be at that core personality. You can be what I refer to as the social or the mirror personality. How do I need to be in the situation? And then obviously you're conscious of how you're doing. So I love that. So you talked about awareness, you talked about accountability. And as someone is going through that process, then what's the next step? Once they have learned to become accountable for those feelings and for those issues.
Yeah. So let me talk about accountability for a second, because I love to go through the accountability pass, and I'll do it
Okay.
quick. Because it's super applicable for individuals. It's helpful in business for sure, but this is really applicable for individuals in any phase of life, whether they're running a business or on a team or whatever it is. So I talk about it as the accountability pass in the book. PASS is the acronym that I use in the book, and it's something that I kind of discovered as I reverse engineered how I keep myself accountable. And then I stumbled upon research that proved it to work, which is usually that's the reverse order. But Michigan State proved it to work. So I'm like, I'm going with it. But anyway, the P in accountability pass is passive accountability. Long story short here is you're telling what other people what you want to accomplish or who you want to be. You're telling as many people as possible about this thing or that you want to accomplish or who you want to be. And that creates this accountability because some of those people follow up with you. If you tell 30 people, 10% will follow up because most people don't care about you. Let's be honest. So those 10%, those 3 will ask you, you go to the gym or you go to your workplace or you talk to your spouse and they'll say, hey, how's it going on achieving that weight loss goal? Or how's it going on opening that business or whatever the goal is? And that creates this little integrity check because you said you were going to do it. And now all of a sudden you've told a bunch of people and a few people are following up with you. So if you want to stay in integrity, you better fricking do the thing, right? So that's part of the accountability pass, the passive part. The second component of the P is you create this goal that you want to accomplish and you write it out as if you've already accomplished it. So you write it out in present tense. I weigh this much, or I've accomplished this specific thing, or I'm on vacation because I've made this much money and I'm just hanging out enjoying myself or whatever it is, right? I've met the woman of my dreams. And that's the passive accountability for your brain because your mind doesn't know the difference between what is reality here and now and a very well constructed reality in your imagination. And so it goes after that constructed reality. So that's passive accountability. Active accountability is of the 3 that follow up with you, of the 30 you told, you say, Joe, can you help keep me accountable with these goals I'm trying to accomplish? And I'll help you with yours too. We can meet on a weekly or biweekly basis to talk about it. And that's something you can do on a 15-minute phone call, a Zoom, in person, and it has extreme power. This is how we did the men's mentoring program. Every week for 1 hour a week, we'd meet with the guys. We did other things with them, but that was the deepest change component. And I tell a long story in the book about this, about some guy that was basically a mute, that because I consistently met with him and I built that rapport and helped him stay accountable, he opened up. And it changed huge things for him and it changed my heart and life big time. So that's active accountability. The first S is structures. Real simple, your to-do list and your calendar. Awareness and this new version of yourself.
I'm going to stop you. You cut out there. Could you say that sentence again?
Yeah. So the first S in PASS is structures, and that's your calendar and your to-do list. And essentially, this is your plan for how you're going to stay at that level of new self-awareness that you have, how you're going to stay accountable to that new level and also to accomplishing the goals now that you can because you're at this new level, because you've let go of all that head trash that was in the way before. And you're aware of it when it comes in so you can drop it real quick too, right? And lastly, the second S is self-accountability. So, Dr. Doug, have you jumped out of an airplane before or zip line or
no, that's something you'd have to work with me on NLP.
Okay. There's some fear there. So, at some point when you're committing to something, let me say it this way, when you've decided to do something, if I'm in an airplane and I'm going to jump out, or if I'm on a zip line or a bungee cord, whatever, I've decided I'm going to do it, but let's go with the zip line. I'm still on the platform, right? I haven't started zipping down, quote unquote. I'm still on the platform. So I can still quit. I can still say to the guy that's hooking me up and say, hey, I'm too scared. I'm not going to do this. I've only decided I'm going to do it, but I haven't done the next component, which is commit. And that's the commitment where you go and you step off the platform and you start zipping 1,000 feet through the air above a tree canopy like my wife and I did in Costa Rica. Once I'm zipping down that line, I can't crawl back up. It's over. I am committed. And so whatever it takes for you as an individual, when you get to that new level of self-awareness and you get to that new level of commitment and level of goals, what is that point of no return? That is the main and primary component because that's the one that you 100% control, right? You do that and all of a sudden I'm locked in. It's over. Like I'm going to do this thing. So that's your accountability pass, passive, active, structures, and self.
Okay. Great. And you used a couple of words, and I want to talk about it just a little bit if you don't mind. You talked about what you need to do and who you need to be. And have you really looked at that from the perspective of how often people are so focused on the doing
Uh,
that they forget that the most important thing is to be? I always use the reference of Christ.
yeah.
And I get into trouble all the time with this question. Did he do what he did to become Christ, or did he do what he did because he was Christ?
Yeah.
And what I find is so often people so focus on the doing, in my personal opinion, is that as we become, our doing just becomes a natural process that follows who we are. Could you tell me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. So when Jesus is asked if he's God, basically, he says, I am.
I am.
And those are the words that the Lord uses in the Old Testament to identify himself. He says that he is the I am. And I couldn't tell you what it is in that'd be Hebrew. I couldn't tell you those words in Hebrew, to be honest, but that's what God says in the Old Testament, and then Jesus says that in the New Testament. And then he also calls himself, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am is also the way that we speak about ourselves. Like you hear the language like, I am a loser, or I am a winner, or I am a father, or whatever other language. I am a business owner. You have all this I am stuff. And we're really hearkening back to the deeper identity that's rooted in us that we were born with. And if you're not careful, you start putting the wrong identity on that. You start putting, I am an alcoholic, which I don't like that language for people, right? Or I'm a drug addict, or I'm whatever else, stupid. I'm all these other things. And then you start to identify with that. So we got to be real careful about that I am language and make sure we're choosing wisely the language of I am. So for me, with my clients, once they let go of all the head trash, and we do that release work through NLP, and something called mental and emotional release is one of the primary techniques I use. But after we let go of all that head trash, then I have them create a personal avatar that they create for who they're going to be 5 to 20 years from now. And it's who they're going to be first, not what they're going to be doing, but who they're going to be. And essentially, it's a bunch of I am statements in 4 components of life: spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. Who are you going to be in those 4 areas 5 to 20 years from now? You create that, and they're all present tense forms because they're all I am statements. And then your brain, your unconscious mind, starts to pursue those I am statements. And you're building this change into your life. You create the accountability around that. You make those decisions that have no point. You can't, you're that the S, the I'm sorry, where you can't return, right? It's over. You've committed. You get to those decisions where you're committed to it. And so that's how I approach the being part, the I am part, when I'm working with my clients, and really for myself. And I'm trying with my kids. They're young, but I'm trying with my kids too.
Well, and as you say, as you're doing that, and as you're writing down, I am this, I am that. I like that. I'm going to have to try that. Um, what happens is then, at least I would think that now it's like, okay, I am, and then when you start to see a conflict of who, quote, you are versus how you are behaving at that point in time, here comes the doing, because now you can do what needs to be done to modify yourself to back to where you are, where I am.
Yep. And that's the growth piece, right? Because you've got the self-awareness, you have the being part, and then you have the accountability, the doing part, and then the growing is the having part. Because if you have the I am part, which is self-awareness, and you have the accountability part, you automatically grow. Because
Yes.
there's no other option. You're going to grow, and sometimes it's uncomfortable because it's a whole new version of yourself, and it's scary, but you're going to grow. So growing is automatic. That's why it's the having, because it's not something you're working for. You're just receiving it because you've done
Yes.
this previous work. So now I'm receiving it. I'm having it. Uh-oh. Now I'm having it. So what do I need to do? I got to empower other people because I'm growing so much that I need to play that forward into other people's lives. And I might be growing my business a lot. I might be growing my family a lot, my community, whatever it is. So I got to rope in other people in the process. And ultimately for me, that's the giving part, be, do, have, and give. So I've done the being, the doing, the having. Now I get to do the giving. But what's beautiful is I empower so much that my self-awareness grows with that, because as you empower more people, you have to become more self-aware in order to do a really good job with them. So you loop back around to self-awareness again, which then means you have to have more accountability and better accountability, which then means you grow, which then means you get to empower more. And then it cycles around in this wonderful, beautiful cycle of personal development and development of others. And it becomes pretty automatic at a certain point. Once you get rid of all that head trash, you start to loop around pretty quick, because you notice when you start to carry the head trash because it feels heavy. Because before you carried so much baggage or head trash, there's 1,000 pounds of it. If you add 20 pounds to it, you don't know the difference. If I'm carrying 1,000 pounds in a car and I add 20 pounds, or in a truck, the truck doesn't notice a 20-pound difference, and neither do we when we add 20 pounds of baggage. But if you remove 1,000 pounds and someone tries to dump 20 pounds on you, you feel it. And it's easy to say no to that trash. It's easy to say no to that baggage. And that's where I want my clients to get. And that's where I want to get too, because it's way easier to not create those bad habits, create those bad mindsets. They're obvious at that point.
Well, and I love, it's just brilliant how you've put that together with, the awareness and the accountability, the growth, and then obviously giving back and empowering others. I think that is so fantastic. There's another area as I was reading some things that I want to talk about for a little bit of time, and that's because I find that so often people in their relationships have such a challenge because we really have not been taught how to communicate. And oftentimes we're not even aware that, as you know, there are three different types of communication and maybe even a fourth. What would you share with the audience as you talk about the blue shirt leaders? What are the three V's of communication? And then talk about how the percentages are, and then what is the fourth channel that has to be so important?
Yeah, so I know I alliterated it, so I might not be able to do the alliteration part, but you've got the vocal, the visual, and the verbal, right? Because I alliterated it to make it easy to remember, but I'm forgetting. Can you
Okay,
help
so
me
you
out
got
for a
the
moment?
verbal, the vocal, the visual, and do you need the
Okay,
percentages, or the
no, I got
percentages by
those.
heart?
Okay,
Okay.
yes. So when you break that down, the visual is your body language. And when it comes to the meaning of communication, 55% of our communication is in the body language. So the way that I'm leaning my shoulders towards you, the way that my hands are moving, my body stance, I'm in a pretty comfortable, relaxed stance. There's all kinds of things happening in my body language and yours as well. That's most of our communication. It's more than half of our communication. Then you get to the tone, or the verbal, and that's 38%. So this is the way that people say things, not what they're saying, but the way they say it. And this is where I think a lot of people get in trouble. They get in trouble with themselves, the way they put tone of voice towards themselves. I'm such an idiot, or they get in trouble with other people and they snap at them with these real quick words. It doesn't even matter what the words are, because that's only 7% of the communication. But because it's the quick snap and the tone that comes out of it, the kid picks it up. I'll tell you a quick story. So I was downstairs making breakfast. I usually make breakfast for my family. My kids were getting ready upstairs for school. I'm downstairs and I'm in a mood. Don't ask me why, but it's PMS. Okay. It's pissed off man stage. Okay. PMS,
Right.
men have it too. So I'm in my PMS and I'm grumpy, and my middle kiddo comes downstairs and she says something and I just snap at her. I just say, I don't know, Haley, like something silly like that. Just real short. That's all tone. I don't know, Haley. And then she looks at me and gets kind of grumpy and mad at me. Well, that happens. And then all of a sudden, down the stairs comes my youngest. And as Haley's kind of snapping at me, Lydia, my youngest, snaps at Haley because Haley's snapping at me, and she picks up on the energy of that. And then as that's happening, here comes my oldest, Annalise, down the stairs, walks into the room, and then she's like instantly grumpy at me because of whatever the heck's going on in the kitchen and how she's like a little bit tardy to breakfast. And I haven't said a word at this point since I first got grumpy at Haley. And I realize in the middle of all this, this is like literally 10 seconds of this disaster that I have created. I go, this is my fault in my head. This is my fault. This is silly. And so I said something to, I think it was to Haley, the first daughter, and I kind of made her giggle. And then I think I like kind of playfully pushed or tickled Lydia, and then Annalise relaxed at that point. And then I turned on some music and everything was fine. But I totally set the tone in a terrible way by one comment. One comment completely ruined the whole morning, at least for a minute or two. And so this is the one that's so easy to miss, but people catch it. People catch your body language too, but they catch the tone real fast. We're very in tune to tone. All right. And then on to the words. Words is the things that you say, obviously, and that's your 7%. So it doesn't, those are very minimal in terms of the meaning of communication. The meaning in communication. So verbal, vocal, or visual, vocal, and verbal.
Okay. And then there's a fourth one you say that most people really are not aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we're talking about intuition. And what's intuition? Okay. What's intuition? Intuition is that gut feeling where I call it a thought that's not my own. And there were several of those today when I was working with my clients. Just for whatever reason today, there's a lot of intuition happening for me. And in the book, if I remember correctly, in the book, I challenged people to figure out where it's coming from. You know, for some, it might be coming from their gut. For others, it could be coming from like their chest. Some people experience it in various places. For me, I actually experience it outside of myself. I experience it just a little bit above my head, for lack of a better way to explain it. And it's like it's this thought that comes to me that's not mine. I know it's not my thought. And so I just trust it. I've used it enough now that I just trust it and I run with it, and it's rarely a miss. And so honing in on your intuition, where it's your gut instinct, is another way to look at it. That's the fourth type of communication you could call it spiritual if you want. It's outside of self in a way. Mm-hmm. So those are the four.
Okay, so we've got that going, but then, and we're not going to have a lot of time on this, but just in general, when we start to communicate with someone, how important is it? Because, in fact, as we're sitting here talking, and I caught myself thinking, all right, what am I going to say next? And I'm going, wait a minute. I've got to really listen to Kyle and understand what he's saying, and then naturally a question will come.
Yep.
How often does that happen where someone's communicating to us and we're really not understanding what they're trying to say?
Sure. I believe the more times that the person that is speaking to you says, the more they have been interrupted in their life and not been given a chance to share their real thought and heart. To me is a way to tell someone else to shut up. I'm not done. And you hear it, the ums and the uhs, all the time from people, because so few people can actually finish a thought without getting interrupted. In 90 seconds, men interrupt women 2.3 times. In 90 seconds, women interrupt men 2.1 times. So every 45 seconds, you're being interrupted. You can't finish a thought often in 45 seconds. So there's a book called Words Can Change Your Brain, and they challenge you to speak in 30 seconds or less. And I'm not doing that right now because I'm explaining things in more detail.
Right.
And so
right.
I'm not doing that. But this weekend, my wife and I really put it to the test. And there's another challenge in there that says, speak no more than one sentence at a time and speak it slowly. So we sat on our lawn in our chairs in the sun, and we just started talking. And it ended up being about 2 sentences at a time. 2 sentences. And then even if the thought's not complete, you shut up and you wait. And they know your thought's not complete. And so they ask you a question to help you complete not to help you complete your thought, but they ask you to just basically go on. And it was this beautiful experience. And we ended up having kind of a shallow conversation, a medium conversation, and a deep conversation in the midst of this 15-minute experience. And we've had those types of conversations before, but not quite so intentionally. So what do you do to not interrupt? I could give you another acronym if you want. I got another acronym for you.
I wish we could. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is, we're at time, unfortunately. And I'm thinking we could go on for another hour. But number one, as you think about what is the message you'd like to share with the audience, what would that be?
Yeah. I've been a bad example today because I've talked so much. But what I want to share is ask open-ended questions and be willing to wait even up to 30 seconds for someone to respond. Give people that courtesy of asking them a curious, open question and waiting for them to think and respond. Because you're serving them by helping them become more self-aware, and you're empowering them because you're helping them to think. So that is what I would suggest people do if they really want to become more self-aware themselves, empower other people, and really respect and honor the thoughts of someone else.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Hey, Kyle, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. How do people find you? How do they find your book?
Sure. Yeah. Go to Gillette Solutions. So my last name, GilletteSolutions.com. And then the book is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, all those other places. But you can download it for free. I'm giving away the ebook for free on my website. So GilletteSolutions.com/book, or just click the book link. And you can get a free reading of the book to learn about what I'm up to and what's in there. And then you'll get a series from me and some invites to have a free conversation with me and learn more about what's going on in my world. And I'll learn more about what's going on in yours.
Well, I have to tell you, this has been amazing for me. I think the way that you have put things together and organized it, and your 4 pillars and all of those type of things are so valuable. And I really appreciate it. And obviously you're at the point of where you are empowering other people, because you've certainly empowered me today. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
You bet. And folks, thanks for listening. I hope you've really enjoyed this, and I look forward to having you join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.